There's lots of seats in front. There's a lot of seats in front here. Please come. Well, good morning. Thanks again for coming to this event, which has been quite an event, I think. I've really had the time of my life so far, so I appreciate all of you being here and your energy and commitment. And I almost didn't make it out my driveway today, so some of you must have encountered some driving challenges on the way here, so I appreciate your effort. We have a couple things going on this morning. I'm just going to take 2 minutes to announce how the rest of the day is going to go. After this session, which ends at 11:30 or 35, we are going to have two simultaneous activities that are for the Nepalis in attendance. My Anthropology of Tibet and Himalaya class is conducting an ethnography and would like to interview the Nepalis in the room about their experiences with the earthquake. So that will be between 11:45 and 1:45, and our other guests are welcome to enjoy Hanover and take lunch and enjoy a walk perhaps around Ockham Pond. And the other activity that will be happening at that time is the Hacktivity. Those of you who have been asked to join that activity will know who you are, and we're going to have a great time facilitated by Professor Craig in Carson 61. So we'll lead the group of you to Carson 61 for that activity. And then at 2 o'clock, we'll reconvene here for the town hall with Swarnam Bagle and Mahendra Shrestha. And have that session then. So thank you again for coming. This morning on our panel, just to give you a sense of we have a slight change in the order of the speakers. First we'll have Professor Kathyrn March from Cornell, then Ashish Khemka, from Sam Houston State, and then Sukriti Raut Pritukarki Dipesh Tiwari from Colby Sawyer College, then Pawan Dhakal and Kripa Dongol from Dartmouth, and Laurel Stavis has very kindly agreed to be a discussant. So without further ado, thank you, Kathyrn.
Thank you all very, very much. Yeah. It really has been a wonderful experience here. For those of you who hadn't seen, this is the brand newly released NASA images of the earthquake damage. Unfortunately, because it was most sensitive at detecting damage to the built environment, it, in a sort of misleading way, indicates that the Kathmandu Valley is more damaged than some of the outside hills. But this gives you an extent of this computer-generated kind of thing. I really do want to thank everyone here for giving me this opportunity to get your feedback on the things we're doing at Cornell. I want to recount to you today the kinds of things we're doing at Cornell. The kinds of things, there are a range of things that we're doing, but they're all ultimately based on Pukri Ridge, on the community where David Holmberg and I have worked, which is to the north and west of Kathmandu, which put it right in between the two biggest earthquakes. It got hit from both sides, and in fact, just last week was hit with another 5.2 earthquake. The damage in this region is extensive. It's the region, the line of the ridge on the hill there is actually the Rasua-Nuakot border. So doing interventions here requires dealing with 2 district offices and 6 VDCs. All right. So at Cornell, as at Dartmouth and many other places, there was an immediate outpouring of concern for Nepal, and it began, as in many places, with a visual and an undergraduate student-run initiative to raise money. Their goal, which they exceeded, was to raise $1 for every single student at Cornell. And they contributed that money to an organization. Some of these things are things I'm going to return to because they're themes in our partnership. They contributed that money to an organization, which is actually 2 organizations. It's called Educate the Children. There is an Ithaca-based NGO, actually it's just US, And then there is a Nepal-based, and they are separate legal entities. Professor Craig has been involved with this. The U.S. side organization raises money for the Nepal side organization, which makes its decisions about how they are expending it. They did this money, this $23,000, went for emergency relief in Dholaka district, and they're planning to do a gala this spring for which the money will go directly to a locally established school building, Nepalese registered, designed, managed, run NGO based on Pukri Ridge called Nepal Freed. You can find out more about both of those organizations on the web if you're interested. For my part, I took leave from my position at Cornell this fall and traveled to Nepal with some funds that I had personally raised, which were also going to educate the children in Nepal, but for work on Pukri Ridge, where they had worked from the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s. I spent my first couple weeks in Nepal meeting with government representatives and following up with all of the organizations who were doing earthquake-resistant design and construction, who I'd began to do contact with over the summer. Then I ran a series of consultations in each of the VDCs on the ridge and with separate groups from the Dalit community and from several of the women's community associations on the ridge to talk with them, to share government information about how reconstruction assistance was going to be available. I need not say they were not terribly pleased with this. They basically decided that this was going to be irrelevant for them. But I felt, again, and this is going to be another theme, coming from an educational institution, not only is it desirable to work directly with Nepalese organizations and give them the resources to do the kinds of things they choose to do, but also that my particular role should be knowledge transfer, sharing information. So I shared the government of Nepal information, and then I began to try to understand from community members what were the next kinds of things they needed help, wanted help to do. And there are lots of things I learned in this, but there's one that seems to be missing from some of the media accounts, and that is one of their greatest concerns was not actually about sheltering themselves through the winter, but sheltering their crops and their animals. And this was one of the big problems that they saw with the government of Nepal designs that I had shared with them. The designs, although they're aesthetically spectacular and in examples of beautiful interpretation of vernacular architecture, they had no provisions for any of the livestock or farming needs. They were designed for an urban or suburban environment. By October, most of the people on the ridge here were living in fairly permanent temporary structures, and they were making plans to rebuild their community. And when I say making plans, I mean really literally. They had raised the equivalent of about $5,000 to pay some architects and engineers to help them think about where they should put water systems, where they should put paths, whether houses should be rebuilt where they were, whether they should be rebuilt in other places, to which from which the funds that I raised, I matched that. So they now have plans for what they want to do in the community as a whole. The most pressing need that people identified was, since they were going to start building their houses, they needed to know how to do that in an earthquake-safe manner. So I began working with the trainers from the School of Shelter and Environment. No web presence for this really, really remarkable organization. They've been training people on earthquake-resistant construction using locally sustainable materials since the mid-1980s. They work very closely with the government of Nepal training programs, but most of the civic training programs that the government runs are at least 3 and sometimes as much as 7 months, and they're for very sophisticated skills like reinforced concrete and plumbing and wiring. These guys put together a 7-day training program in which they actually, as you can see, took people through the stages of building a house, a very small house. Because as I said, there are 6 VDCs on the hill, I talked to all of the leaders in all of the villages in the different VDCs, and I'm going to return again to the question of VDCs as a development vehicle, but it was numerically, it worked out well because the School for Shelter and Environment runs its trainings for 30 people at a time, so that meant that each VDC could send 5 trainees. I said that I hoped that they would develop selection criteria. They did. I said that I hoped that they would be inclusive of the ethnic and caste diversity on the ridge, which they were to within as close as exact percentage points as you can do with full indivisible human bodies, right? I also hoped that they would have some women. They did not. The program is now supporting a number of women to do the more extended Government of Nepal electrician and plumbing courses. They got a hands-on training, this is a week-long hand-on training to build earthquake-resistant construction. Those of you who've been looking at that will recognize most of the major principles of that, so I won't go through it. The goal was to get the training in the process of building an actual structure, which they did. It's a very small structure, but it will house posters about the construction details, which are now concealed by the mud plastering. It will be open to visitors. It's on the main trail going up the ridge, so it's getting a steady flow of people going through it. And it will be used by the community as a communal cookhouse and guest house. Some of the important lessons that I learned in working on this short project, this little over 2-month project, was that VDCs are way too large. They are fractured by some long-standing tensions between ethnic and caste communities. They are often highly gendered, and those divisions are in many ways being reinforced and repurposed with the addition of party politics in the area. So what I would like to propose is that I think that although the VDC has to be the unit of government administration, villages are much better suited. Natural traditional villages are much better suited for making plans, for making decisions, and for helping to ensure financial transparency. They are they're relatively large, about 150 in this area, about 150 to 200 houses. So they seem to be at the right scale to do that. Hamlets, which is to say like 10 to 15 houses, seem, because in part they are also based on traditional labor exchange relationships, seem to be particularly suitable for actually managing the work-related aspects of a rebuilding aspect. So undergraduates, fundraising, an initial intervention to provide earthquake-safe training. The third initiative that comes out of Cornell and the Ithaca area is with our local community college, where the trustees of the State University of New York authorized the creation of a presidential fellowship for earthquake victims from Pucri Ridge. This brought the cost of it down to the cost of local tuition. It's supported by a whole series of mentorship relationships, host family, by which I mean free room and board, host family relationships from the community. And we are still very excited about this, but lest you think that only the government of Nepal is hard to work with, the first student who met the qualifications to be, that has got an adequate TOEFL score, has first division pass in the US, is currently in a process in which his visa is in limbo. The final and most ambitious initiative, and the one that I really want to talk to you about, I don't have much time left, is called the Cornell Nepal Recovery Partnership. This is a combination of courses and design work studios intending to link the interests of the communities on Pucri Ridge with Cornell University faculty and students, and with Cornell alumni. And here I want to make very clear, these include and are very importantly dependent on the 150 or so Cornell alumni who are active in the Cornell Alumni Association of Nepal. So these are Nepali nationals who are in various positions of considerable influence in Nepal itself, and also to help link the communities through these plans with potential funders and donors, and of course, working completely in collaboration with the government of Nepal. The Earthquake Recovery Partnership has a very strong group of close to 30 professional masters and graduate students from a wide range of fields. What they are trying to do, on the one hand, is get professional development training, and on the other is to design fundable projects to assist the communities in finding the resources and technical expertise to do the village reconstruction plan that they've developed. We created 2 courses. This will make you dizzy. I put this up, we had to do this for the students so they could figure out where they would register and when they would meet and all of this. But I wanted to just flash it for you to make it clear that we had to work outside of the usual box of standalone courses to do this kind of work. And I'm circulating a couple of handouts, one of which describes what the 2-credit course that is specifically organized to support the graduate students' work in this design teams. So they are working busily. They are working busily, and they are working in accordance with what we think of as the core commitments of this kind of work. We are establishing clear principles that, first of all, articulate community rights, and you'll notice that those rights rely very heavily on ILO Convention 169 on the rights of indigenous peoples in their formulation, and making clear what are acceptable outsider roles. And you will see that the outsider roles revolve around information, facilitating, and supporting, not defining, not managing, right? We have assembled the local concerns into 3 major areas, roughly rebuilding structures, increasing access to money, all of this takes income, and providing support in terms of infrastructural support, whether that's roads or livelihood, or roads or credit. All right. Our approach is centered on the Taman community of Manigao, but it is intended to be able to be replicable out beyond that. It's a unique structure on the U.S. side of things because we have the program governance board on the U.S. side, have a suite of different projects that are being designed, and have certain shared commitments as to how to evaluate the success of those projects, working in partnership, as I said, with the communities in Nepal to pilot a community-driven, sustainable, results-based program for earthquake reconstruction that effectively models a long-term partnership for empowering local socioeconomic development. And I think my arm is just telling me time is up, but I'm going to abuse you. One thing that's very distinctive to this partnership is the length of time that Cornell has been working in Nepal. This is the first time I've ever gone public with this picture, so I have some trepidation about it. But it makes, I think, an important point about the ideas of reciprocity in this work. We have had long connections in anthropology with development experts at Cornell. We are one of the few places that regularly teaches the Nepali language throughout the whole year and at all levels. And we have many students, both Nepalese and American, who have made Nepal their career. Notable in this is the Cornell Nepal Study Program, which is the only fully collaborative university exchange program in Nepal. It has trained, actually, we always say exactly the same number of Nepalese students as American students. In fact, it's trained more Nepalese students than American students. And along in the same idea of being a linkage to support for local initiatives, David Holmberg was pivotal in obtaining a 5-year Wenner-Gren Institutional Development Grant for the Department of Anthropology at Tribune University. So, mutual benefit, being embedded and community-driven, these are the foremost commitments of the Cornell Nepal Earthquake Reconstruction Recovery Program. We see ourselves as consultants for communities. And this begins, this in many ways is a reversal of the usual top-down, center to periphery, urban to rural, elite to marginalized movement of development planning. And it's not, of course, to say that the expertise at Cornell doesn't have any say in this, but it's a say in dialogue where local communities have the right to determine outcomes. And there are some issues that we will bring to the table very, very forthrightly. Issues of inclusiveness, issues of sustainability, issues of equity, which are variably on the table in Nepal. And these result precisely from our collective centuries of experience in Nepal and in international development. But of all the things that we know about international development, the one that is most important and the least well institutionalized in practice is local buy-in. We know that unless local communities take ownership of projects and programs, they fail. So the Cornell model for full earthquake recovery begins with community ownership, and we hope it will end with donor buy-in to support this suite of local projects to help the communities on Pukri Ridge. Thank you very much. On that Facebook page are archived findings about earthquakes, sustainable construction, a whole bunch of things. Okay, so abuse it.
I guess you're going to be nobody saying anything, so let's get this way, and you are here, right? Is this the right order? This gentleman is up next? Okay.
Yep.
And we'll just put this up for you. And you don't have to lean into that. We'll pick you up. Is it on the screen, though?
Thank you, Dr. March, and thank you, Dr. Bauer and the Dickey Center, and good morning to everybody. Going to talk a little bit about two projects that I worked on over the summer, not through the university, but through a private foundation, and a little bit about my research. I look into resource substitution, social media and reach network analysis, and also resilient communities from social capital, but that's not the discussion today. There was two projects I worked on, and it's really the focus that I want to keep today. One is on human security, specifically human trafficking or prevention of human trafficking. And let me spend a couple of minutes talking about that. There's various estimates post-earthquake that the incidence of human trafficking of women and young girls has gone up 3 or 4 times because of the supply shock, because of not really a demand shock. As you all know, Nepal is a tier 2 country in the US Department analysis, and it's ranked 4th or 5th in incidence of human trafficking by various estimates. Point is, it's a serious concern. My work with the foundation was with Mighty. We spoke about them briefly yesterday, and they're one of the proponents of prevention of such activities. But keep in mind, there's several others out there, and we should not ignore them, or we should not think that their work is less impactful. It's really a collaborative effort. The area we focused on was in Sindulpal Chowk, which is again one of the major areas that was affected by the disaster. And the destination countries still tend to be India through the border and Middle East, but I know there's more restrictions on that. The government is trying to slow that down. What were some of the initiatives we did? And these are really rapid, short-term initiatives. One was increase training of border police on both sides of the border, both from the India and the Nepal side. And that's very important because they're the ones who intercept, and they're the ones who, once intercepted, get in touch and rehabilitate these individuals with organizations like Mighty. So working with government officials, working with private individuals in the area, working with foundations, we were able to work on this. We also expanded the footprint of transit homes. Now, these are not border security posts, but they're actually transit homes by Mighty and other such organizations where these individuals who are intercepted go and get shelter, get rehabilitation. So this was expanded to 12. There were, I believe, 4 in operation. And these are high-cost operations for several reasons, including rent seeking, etc. So they're not that simple in operations. We also did in the Chitwan district some self-defense classes for these women. You may ask, I mean, are these women really going to use self-defense when someone comes and lures them into human trafficking? That's not the point. The point is it builds some confidence, so it may not eradicate the problem at the source, but it may reduce abuse at some point along the chain. And that's important. We need to give these women these skills. So those are some of the short-term projects that we did, but my point here, or the objective of this discussion, is really to look at what the current and future needs are. And this is, I think, issue we've not touched upon much upon the last 2 days. From a financial perspective, they say they need 35,000 for these 12 border homes. That's the data I received 3 days ago. That's a lot of money there. And of course, we'll do some fund-seeking initiatives, but that's a longer term. Another solution, I think, is to increase private sector participation. And I don't mean it from a financial perspective. I mean it from the use of technology. If you see there's a lot of data analytics in the financial sector that looks at ways in which signals for human trafficking, opening and closing of bank accounts, movement of funds. There's ways to prevent it with hospitality industries. So we need to involve the private sector, and may not be at the border, but further on at the destination points, because they're the ones who have the capacity and the skills and the ability to do it. The next question that I really want to dwell upon, and maybe we can talk about it at the end, is the solution to this is not taking these women into a home and taking them back to Kathmandu and keeping them there in the campus. But it's really to what can we do in the long term? Are there resources? Can they be resources? Yesterday we spoke about potential resource constraints. Can these women be trained to be the nurses and the medical staff for the future? They're very unlikely to want to migrate after the traumatic experience they've had. So they may want to stay in the areas there. And that's typically a benefit in such industries where otherwise you see people get trained and move on to cities and other countries. What about the schools that some of us have spoken about? Can they be used in the rebuilding efforts, or can they be actually educated out there? And that's also something to think about. Distance learning, I know we've spoke about the use of technology. Is this another venue, another medium they can use to educate themselves and maybe share their experiences? And this is a point, I know Dr. Marsh briefly talked about the visa, and I'm not a legal expert or a immigration expert, but I know that the T visa, which is a human trafficking visa, is greatly underused. I know the former ambassador is here and maybe he has some comments on it, but globally, the estimates are that only 60,000 have been used in a quota of 50,000. Many of us are here on visas and we know how difficult it has been, but why is there such a gap in this? I'm going to play a short video from the interviews we had at MIT, just to put all of this in someone else's words.
The recent earthquake in Nepal has destroyed thousands of homes and has left many villagers with few options on where to turn or how to move forward. In these times of desperation, many girls are sent away and told they will be given work only to find themselves being trafficked and exploited.
एकजना मान्छेले काममा लगाइदिन्छु भनेर मसँग हिँड भने अनि अब म हिँडे अब त्यो मान्छेले चाहिँ यस्तो भने तैँले पैसा कमाइस् भने तेरो परिवारमा तेरो आमाबाउले तँलाई धेरै माया गर्नेछन्, जहिले पनि तँलाई हेप्छ कुट्छ, तैँले यत्रो अन्याय सहेर बस्छस्, बरु हिँड हामीसँग सहरमा गएर काम गर्नु भनेर भने। अनि अन्त 10 दिनसम्म चाहिँ त्यस्तो केही गरेन, अनि 10 दिनपछि चाहिँ पिट्न थाल्यो। अनि मैले त मानेन। अनि अन्त त्यो दिदीहरूले धेरै मान्छेहरू ल्यायो, अनि त्यही कोठीको आइमीहरू हुन्छ नि, हात खुट्टा समात्यो, त्यही जबरजस्ती रेपहरू गर्न लाग्यो।
Just wanted to put that in someone else's words. We all are aware of this problem, but the issue is that it gets shocked after such incidents, and there's no reason for it to happen. Just in closing this segment, the US government, and this is not an apples to apples comparison, but the US government values a human life 7 to 10 million when they look at insurance or the cost of life. Many of these girls are sold, or their life is valued at $32. Again, it's not apples to apples, but are they really worth $32? The second case study, and I'll go a bit quick through this because we've looked at it yesterday, is building learning environments. This was a young boy we saw up on the way to the site. I'll just go through a couple of pictures and then I'll talk about what we observed and what needs to be done. This was a school. You can see the exterior of the debris. So the interior, it's just a corner, not much out there. It's a principal from another angle. Students. Again, students. Now this is an interesting picture because here you see the school. This is what used to be school and some shelter. This is a temporary shelter donated by the government of Canada. And out here, there's some rebuilding efforts, which we'll see in a minute. This is the inside of the temporary school. So people sleep here and they educate themselves here. And it's just a small space. I mean, maybe we could fit 4 of them in this classroom. So here's what we were doing, rebuilding, using the local community. That's the only income they had. And of course there was several volunteers as well from the foundation. Just to tell you where this took place, it was in Sindarpur Chowk district and in these two, this municipality and this village, Milamchi and Jamiri. And they're next to each other in case any of you have been there or know aware of it. So what was the takeaways from this? The task was simple. It was to build 2 schools, one for 250 students, another one for 72 students. We used local labor. They really didn't have anywhere else to go. They had the skills because many of their homes were self-built, and they got some sort of compensation. Financial compensation was of limited use because they had nowhere to spend that money. They'd rather get food or resources. There was resource procurement was a challenge, getting metal, getting bricks. People had to carry them up. So keeping that in mind, we spoke a lot about earthquake-resistant design and materials. In these cases, that was not an option. We didn't have time or need to get these materials and get the design. The immediate short-term need was to rebuild these facilities. And keep the same structure, keep the same design. But what about the future? The future is moving towards permanent structures. That's what needs to be done. And then some questions that need to be asked. Are there enough teachers? You know, we all talk about rebuilding, but are there enough educators out there? There's plenty of students. And another broader question, which some of us who know a little bit more about the system may want to ask, is this the right model? Does each village, each municipality need to have a school? Because if it does, do we need to keep rebuilding after every earthquake? Or should there be a hub and spoke approach where you'd rather build one school which is permanent than 10 schools which need to be rebuilt every few years? Because earthquake will happen again. It's just geological. That's not going to go away. So should there be consolidation? Just want to close talking about some of the other issues which we briefly touched upon yesterday, but not in great detail. Dr. March talked about the importance of grains. That's a point I have out here. Agriculture is, the estimates are 2/3 of the population. A more specific estimate, I think, was 64% or 74%. Point is that there's a lot of individuals dependent on agriculture. From an economic perspective, that needs to change. That's a demographic transition, but part of the whole cycle. But as things stand, we need to provide storage now that the winter is over, spring is approaching, for the harvest, particularly maize and grains, rice. What about seeds? They don't have all the seeds that they need. And we also need to create diversity in their vegetation, so maybe some diversity in the vegetables. There's also a need for irrigation. There's, of course, long-term irrigation needs, but what about short-term, immediate irrigation, water harvesting or other means? Because without that, we reach a pause in the cycle. Another issue which I want to close with is livestock, because with agriculture comes livestock, and that's, again, not being touched upon in great detail. And for me, one of the main issues I saw was the need for veterinary support for the livestock, because they've either been ill after the incidents or they may become ill, or if not, they need to be healthy to be able to complete the cycle of growth. And then small business recovery, I think that's another issue for small and medium enterprises. They need to get low cost, low interest loans. Next steps, I think communities like all of you are the champions of such efforts and need to continue this. You're really the flagship in the international community, and I'd love to talk to anybody with any more information they need. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Sukriti Raut. I'm a recent graduate of Sir College. It's a small 4 years liberal arts college, half an hour away from here. Now I'm working at Dartmouth Medical Center. These past few months, I had the opportunity to work with Dartmouth-for-Nepal and organize this summit, and we all know what a great event this has been. Thank you so much, Ken and Sienna, for bringing all of us together. Today we have few folks from Sir College, a few Nepali, and our President Galligan of Sir College. I'm briefly going to touch upon the immediate response that Sir had, and Prithul and Dipesh are going to reflect on their recent trip to Nepal and their future plans. So, like anyone else, we first focused on the immediate donation and aid we could provide. So these were the one virtual, other 4 physical places that we went to for donations. But we were very careful about not just asking for money. We wanted to, actually show the culture. We were selling handicrafts. There were students from ceramics class that were donating potteries to sell, and then we were, people were donating everything they had, and we were singing and dancing. So we wanted to, show that you're not just giving us money. You're investing on the culture, I guess. And then we went to the 2 churches nearby. We applied henna. And we were very strategic about going to the churches. We wanted to make sure we had enough people, so we went to the Sunday service. After the service, people stay back for refreshments. So that's where we were, displaying our table with tankas. And so these were our main accomplishments. It's not a lot, but from a small college like Colby-Sawyer, this is great, and the support that staff, professors, students, friendship families they've shown us is so incredible. So here comes the challenge that we had. So for us, it was not the challenge to collect money. We had the money, but we were confused as to where to donate that money. Dartmouth had their homegrown organization, Ashish-for-Nepal, so I don't think they faced that issue. But for us, who to donate to? And again, at first the big names came to our head: Red Cross, Oxfam, but we didn't know where that money went. So there were some people, they were saying, okay, let's give the money to some grassroots level organizations. They're actually going to these places and helping directly. It's efficient that way, and they can be held accountable because you know them. So Rotaract Club of Pashupati is a sister organization of Rotary Club of Kathmandu. So we gave them money, and my sister is in their organization, so she said, we have a group of people ready to just depart. All we need is money to buy some sanitation supplies, because there was this place in Kavre that had no toilets. And so we decided to give that money to them, and that's the last one, Furchoki Sherpa. She is this little petite Sherpa girl, but she managed to raised $20,000, and she is using that money to reconstruct the only school and the only water tap that was in her town. And and it's so, and we can see the money that we gave to these small organizations. They sent us pictures, and we know where our money went. This is where Furchoki village is. This is the school, So our main challenges were the big one was deciding the right organization. Do we give to big organizations where they already have staffs, which is good, or these small organizations that are showing us results? I guess they're faster and they're more accountable too. So we had that big challenge. We even had some conflicts. And then again, the other challenge was the rumors and misinformation, and a lot of them were debunked by Dr. Swarnim Wogle yesterday. And news would publish news like this, like government to take all back deposits meant for disaster relief, and how the Red Cross raised $500 million for Haiti and built only 6 homes. So that really confused us even more. And the last, I think everybody here who were here, whose families were back home, they felt helpless, and you were kind of guilty, sorry for the spelling, that, you're here in America enjoying, living in luxury, and their parents were in tents with dripping waters. So that was another sense of guilt.
Good morning, I'm Deepesh. I'm junior at Colby-Sawyer College, and I'm a bio major. Now I'd like to share with you how Colby-Sawyer College community have been contributing to address the issue, and Colby-Sawyer College have been contributing in the sector of education and in solving the humanitarian crisis that has arisen as a result of earthquake.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'd like to continue. 3 years ago, 2 students from Kolbi College started the Nepal project with an aim of providing underprivileged children of one of the remote school in Nepal and access to educational resources. The group that went there the first year built a classroom, and the project continued the second year, and then I was the part of the project, and we went there to construct a library the second year, and the project took a new significance last year following the earthquake that struck Nepal in April. That we decided that we have to expand the project and respond to the immediate crisis that has arisen. And many Kolbi students and families were affected within the capital, while the other living in rural parts struggle to find safe shelter and potable water. Considering that a college so connected with Nepalese community, we felt an urgency to go back and then help from our sides. And it is our honor to lead a group of 11 diversified students with an inclusion of president of the college to the epicenter of earthquake, which is Gorkha. And we started raising funds and from various fundraising events and from GoFundMe accounts, and we were able to raise more than $2,500 in the span of 3 months. And we started thinking about what we could do with the money. We thought maybe we can take this money and then help and donate it to some school and then help them rebuild the school. But we did not feel it appropriate to donate money to one of the government schools, because in fear of corruption, the money can go into the pockets of some people, and there is no transparency in keeping track of all the money that went into rebuilding efforts. So we decided to donate 5 computers, stationery materials, and supplies to one of the schools which is in Gorkha. And we had a small event over there where we donated all the computers and the things that we have collected from here and in Kathmandu. And during 15 days of our trip, I realized that Nepali are basically facing 2 major challenges. One is the aftermath of the earthquake, and another one is the political gridlock that has been there for like several years. Right now, Nepal recently drafted a constitution, and the people in the southern region of Nepal felt like they have not been, the new constitution has not been inclusive of their rights and needs, and they have started protesting in the southern region, which has stirred resentment in all over the country. So, and that has impacted all over the country, and the country which had just been trying to recover from the earthquake is facing another challenge. And then the 2 challenges are like, the effects of 2 challenges are varies in like different parts of the country. In Kathmandu, the effects of political situation are like, the effects are greater in Kathmandu than in Gorkha. I realized the effects of earthquake are profound in Gorkha than in Kathmandu. Kathmandu has already recovered. The people in Kathmandu have suffered the loss of devastation, but they have moved on. And then they have the ongoing crisis of fuel and other stuff, while the people in Gorkha are still trying to recover from the effects of earthquake. And Prithul will shed light on the situation of Gorkha and all the other things that we saw. and I'd like to hand over the mic to Kripa.
Thank you, Deepesh. Well, it was a life-changing trip for me. It was really emotional as it was my first time back home after the earthquake. And there were lots of talks going on about the economic blockade that was going on. So we're leading a group of 11 students. Most of them were Americans. So we're really fearful that the trip might not happen because of the economic blockade. But I'm glad that the trip happened, and we went to some of the rural areas of Nepal where the earthquake was, where the people were really affected by the earthquake. Two things that still comes in my mind when I think about Nepal is the tears of people in Gorkha when they try to recall the earthquake. And the other thing that is the frustration that people had. We went there. We went to two different communities in a village called Paslang in Gorkha. People were frustrated because no one was doing anything for them. And the other reason they were frustrated was because there's several people going into their village, asking different questions to them, and all they were doing was asking questions, taking pictures, and doing nothing. So basically, they were just giving them a false hope. And after I heard everything from them, when one of the projects we had was to make a documentary out of it, and some people came to us and said, "This is really frustrating because no one has been doing anything to us. Everyone comes here, takes our pictures, talks to us, interviews us, but no one has done anything." And the night of earthquake, I think I found out about the earthquake around at 2 a.m. in the morning. It was a Friday night, and after that, I tried calling my parents. I couldn't contact them until 7 a.m. in the morning. You can imagine how I was feeling. But the feeling that I had when I went to Nepal, and when people told me their frustration, I had never felt such helplessness ever before, like not even when I couldn't contact my parents for 7 or 8 hours. So some of the things that we realized after going to Nepal was we did pretty good job immediately after the earthquake, but we have slowed down a lot. And one of the reasons for that is the economic blockade that was going on in Nepal for past 6 to 7 months. Nepal lost, economically, they lost around more than $6 billion because of earthquake. But the loss because of the economic blockade was bigger than what it had from the earthquake. And I was talking with some government organization, and some of them told me that there are more than 12,000 homes that needs to be taken down only in Kathmandu Valley, but the capacity of Nepal is that they can take down only 3 buildings per day. So that means it's a long process, and it will take even longer because of the ongoing economic blockade. Another thing that government was doing at that time when we were in Nepal was they were distributing 1,500 rupees to all the earthquake-affected people. We found that some of the money went to people who were not even affected by the earthquake, and that happens a lot in Nepal, so I was not surprised at all. The second thing that we found out was that when the government distributed the money, some of the people were wasting those money in alcohol, and that wasn't helpful. That wasn't helpful at all to the people who are affected by earthquake. And these are some of the pictures of earthquake-affected areas that our group took. So I just want to wrap up our seeing with these pictures. So this is the tower that everyone has been talking about.
This is the symbolic tower of Nepal.
Yeah.
Now it is down to this one story from 7 stories.
This is the village that we went to, and this is the place where 3 kids died because the building fell upon them. And we went to one of the school over there that Deepesh mentioned, and this was the temporary class that they were using to hold the classes. And this is the temporary settlement that they have been living. It was quite sad because a family of 10 people was living in a small tent where basically maybe 2 to 3 people would fit, or maybe slip in US.
And these are the supports that
They are
have been
providing to
provided for the building.
So this is the famous Kathmandu Darbar Square. It was really emotional because most of us have at least spent half of our weekends over here, so it was really emotional when we saw these pictures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mita bangwali ramro kudara khawai manma sangali hamro school cha sarai ramro kaile pani nahosain ramro हामी त बङ्गाली राम्रो कुरा राखै मनमा सङ्गाली शिक्षा भन्ने ठुलो धन छोरा छोरी दुवैलाई समान हामी त बङ्गाली राम्रो कुरा राखै मनमा सङ्गाली.
The actual song is quite long, but I won't play the entire thing because we don't have time. So this was from winter break where I went back for some of my thesis research, and I'm a geography major, and I was looking at basically social vulnerabilities and how they affect agency in response to natural hazards, specifically in the context of Tamang communities in Sindhupalchok and how they dealt with the earthquake. And it was really interesting. I think I went through a lot of moral dilemma things with how much I should record, what pictures I should take, what I should not. But this, the host dad where I was staying, I was listening to the girl singing, and he was like, "You should record it." And I'm like, "No, it's not an interview. It's fine. You can just sing." And he was like, "No, you should record it, and you should send it to people so that they know that our kids can sing. They just won the singing competition. You should tell them that they're really talented." So I didn't really have any other platform, so I thought today was quite appropriate. I want to read a short journal entry from one of the days that I spent during my thesis research over the winter break. So some of the things that happened that day was I woke up to nationalistic songs playing on the radio and thought about the ways we're exposed to propaganda, thought back to my school days when we learned what it meant to be Nepali with our national dress and our national songs and our national pride. Then I proceeded to dwell on the fact that Benedict Anderson had just died and his ideas of nationalism, and I was thinking about how a lot of my critical thinking comes from my Western education, from having studied in the States for 6 years at this point. And that day I'd also asked a little girl if she'd be my travel companion, and she said no, because I might go sell her off. You're not supposed to take chocolate from jogis, she said, and proceeded to explain to a little boy how people take your kidneys. This is after she had actively participated while I was interviewing her grandfather and wrote down the name of all his children and his children's children so that they could remember their names in a few years after her grandfather would pass. A Didi I'd interviewed a few days back had showed me pictures of her daughter who'd perished in the earthquake, taken with this tiny Nokia phone. And we also talked about her loans, which she'd been paying like 16 plus interest on from like loan sharks in the villages, not from financial institutions. And she asked me how to pay her debts and keep paying for her kids' schools. And she told me how her husband had no skill and her left hand was disabled, so she couldn't really work that much either. And she was telling me how they have no fixed income, little land, and a lot of loans. And I asked her if she'd considered taking her kids out of private school and putting them into a government school. And I didn't know what else to say because that was like the only thing I could think of at that point. Recently, a bomb had gone off in Kathmandu in like the Dish TV tower because they wouldn't stop playing Indian TV channels. And so like one of the Maoist factions decided they wanted to bomb it. And so one of the guys in the villages who was a very radical Maoist, and I had been having some great conversations with him, he told me about his history with how he was like in this sort of monarchy-based party before, and then why he switched and how he had hid in the jungle during the Civil War and how he got the shit kicked out of him by the army when he was found out. And he was telling me all this, and I was also thinking back to the other Didi who told me how her father-in-law had been killed by the Maoists, and I was wondering, like, in this tiny village, like, what is the connection? Who are these people who are living together after decades of civil war, after decades of caste-based, gender-based violence, after all of these things? And this I actually posted on Facebook and then promptly took down because I felt really weird about it. And I think that's sort of the deal with the pictures as well. I started taking pictures when I first went back right after the earthquake, and then kind of stopped taking pictures because it felt like it wasn't my place. But I have a few pictures, like 3 pictures that I will share. So I was actually doing the geography FSP in Prague when the earthquake hit, and Dartmouth was so nice to me in that they let me drop the program and go back home. It was a very selfish decision in part because I know that there's so much people did from here, from wherever they were. They fundraised, they really actively campaigned and whatnot. I mentally was not in a place to do that. I'm a very, like, I try to be mindful and I'm very place-based, and I just couldn't do anything from where I was. So I decided I wanted to go back. And so I did, the first thing I did was go to Yellow House. I landed at like 6 a.m. and then for 6 hours I was going around Kathmandu meeting all my friends and family, and then dropped stuff off at Yellow House. Yellow House was mentioned yesterday by Kevin and Austin, and Nayantara is one of the most phenomenal women ever. She organized a great group of volunteers and great relief efforts. So I took this trip to Gumtang. It was one of my first relief trips, and we went to one of the closer villages that was close to the highway, delivering some relief materials, and then we went on need assessment trips around the nearby villages. And when I saw this picture, this is of a school where you can see that the steel frames are standing, but all the walls have collapsed in. And this is when I was so thankful that it was a Saturday when kids weren't in school, because all of the schools that we saw, this was the same state, was that all the walls had collapsed in and the frames were standing, but like I can't even imagine what kind of chaos would have ensued if kids were actually in school. After our sort of relief thing was done, we continued on to do our research, need assessment, and we went trekking, not really trekking, hiking around 3-4 villages around the area. It took us like 3 extra days. And in one of these areas, in Kipche, which is just maybe like 8 hours up, they had already started building their temporary shelters that they planned to live in for at least the next 2 years. So the hill where their village was, that had completely, all the houses had collapsed, like not a single house was standing, and they had moved sort of to the next hill over and started building these shelters. And first they were crammed into smaller shelters, and they kept building and expanding and basically just like, colonized this little hill, and now they have these shelters. And this was maybe a week and a half after the first quake. And we were talking to them, like when we entered the village, it was just constant like knocking of tin and nails on woods, and that was like one of the most, it's such like a vibrant memory in my head, the sounds, because all of this time there was like very quiet, nothing happening elsewhere, but this village was like completely in action, and that was because they in a way knew that they had to do this for themselves. They weren't really waiting around for anybody. they were waiting around, okay, if people bring relief, people bring relief. If people bring meds, people bring health camps, they do. But we're not going to wait around for them, at least not for shelter. They weren't waiting around for tents. They just went on and built. On the same trip, this is sort of before we got to Kipche on the relief distribution. I picked this because it was an interesting day because UNHCR gave us a bunch of tents. And we're like, great, we're going to take these tents to people who need them. And turns out UNHCR also wanted to come. So we were on this truck, and then UNHCR, one guy, one driver, were in their car. And they followed us to take pictures and take notes, and so they were there. That was great. One of the comments that our local contact made was like, oh, yo UN भन्ने company को नाम चाहिँ देखा हो तर के गर्छ थाहा छैन. He's saying like, oh, I see this UN letters everywhere. It's like some business, but I have no idea what they do. And I know UN does a lot of good work, not to, like completely criticize or shit on them, but that was sort of the general impression in the village. Like you see these banners everywhere, like not just the UN, even some of the small initiatives, the big initiatives, you see these banners, but you never really know what are they doing, like what are they coming for, why are they taking pictures. And one of the great things about Nayantara was that this whole group, like everybody that came together under Yellow House decided we're gonna do a no banners, no frills kind of work, and so we never really had a formal group, organization, banners of any sort. We took pictures mostly for accountability and then I guess some for fundraising, but did not. So I'm sort of rambling, but I do have a small theme here. This is sort of the summer part, and then the thesis was my, winter was my thesis research in the Tamang community in Shaole in Sindupalchok. And one of the things that I think was the main thing for me that I realized when the earthquake hit, when I went back for winter break, was that the earthquake didn't, yes, it caused a lot of destruction, but the earthquake isn't the big problem Nepal has. It just exposed a lot of the vulnerabilities that we already have, whether it was in terms of how our public health system works, how our education works, how our government works. The earthquake did a great job of just exposing these vulnerabilities. And one of the things that then mobilized me to take action was that realizing that there's a lot that happens from top down, but a lot of the good work that I saw happened from bottom up. One of the posts that actually motivated me to go back was this Nepal cycling team, a bunch of friends of mine who had helmets on from cycling, just went straight to Basantapur Darbar Square, started digging people out of the rubble. And I remember being so frustrated at that time with people who very reasonably stayed home, stayed close to safety. But Kathmandu, I was resenting Kathmandu quite a bit because Kathmandu got all the attention. The Darbar Square falling, Thayer falling, that was all the media in the world media. But when you looked at it, a lot of the damage was in rural areas of Nepal where they didn't have access to international networks like we did. Okay, I know time is running out, so I'm going to kind of try and wrap it up. So the three sort of main things that I focused on was immediate help, mental health, and Pawan will probably talk more about the mental health aspect. And I thought a lot about like what agency and action meant. Like some of the people mentioned yesterday, a lot of the great help was happening from trekking and mountain biking guides who already knew what they were doing. They were skilled. They had all these hard and soft skills as well as logistics. They had partners in communities, and they just went right out, and they were so great at mobilizing. And a lot of the people, I think, from Kathmandu as well, they tried a lot, but when we went to villages, it was very apparent that like the youth is very re-energized. All they need are like a skill and a platform. They've always wanted to help their communities, and we've been talking about like volunteering and if it's sustainable and if it's not sustainable, but I think we've only been talking about volunteering as like someone else coming and volunteering for your community. But what about you volunteering for your own communities? How do we sort of rekindle that in not just Kathmandu, but all these local villages where, yes, there's a lot of out-migration happening, people are migrating for education, for jobs and whatnot, but there's also people who went back to their communities to help. So there is this connection, there is this desire already. And my sort of short idealistic goal is outdoors education. This is a little random, but I think outdoors education is great in that it kind of gives you the hard and soft skills to deal with challenges as they come, but it also empowers you to take charge and deal with stressful situations and apply yourself as situations come up. And if we could sort of implement starting that. My scale is much smaller than like we've gone from like the national scale to a lot of smaller local scales. My scale's much smaller in that thinking how can these individuals who I've seen so many people who there's a flight and fight response, and you know, like yes, something terrible happens and bodily you either go towards flight or fight. But I think there's certain amount of training that can prepare you for the fight situation, to take charge, to go into your communities and do things, and not just stay in and be afraid, but maybe do something with your fear. So yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming again. It's really, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday too. It's just really great and makes the senior year go better, for us at least personally. I'm gonna just ramble on for about a couple of things that we were doing in Nepal about related to mental health first, and then maybe talk about what we did as Dartmouth-for-Nepal, even though it's not really like a real thing like Cornell apparently has. Yeah, so and I'll touch on a few things that I was thinking about when Professor March was speaking earlier. So yeah, this summer I also got the opportunity, unlike Kripa, I was here. She was in a foreign exchange program, and I was here in the spring when the earthquake happened. I also, like every other Nepali, probably like just learned through other friends who are more in like media, and they're just like, oh, what is happening? Are your families okay? And all that stuff. But I was here, I mean, okay, I probably talk about this later, but the way just, the many things that go through your mind, one of the things was, okay, now what do I do? Like, do I just try and call, first of all, make sure everyone's okay? And then there's so many friends that I had not talked, like just could not contact at all. And even if they had, because everyone's kind of like now kind of segregated in like these small communities, and they don't want to, like, you have friends, but you're kind of sticking to your own families, right? So it was really hard to contact people in that sense. But I was here in sort of those sort of cities, which, at least for me, I wasn't really thinking about anything in particular. And then we had a big town hall meeting where like, we don't know what to do, so we'll just come together and talk about things. And there was like the big moment for me personally, and that's what kind of like the biggest reason that I didn't go home directly after the earthquake, was kind of seeing this like mostly random people, but a lot of folks from Dartmouth who are somehow concerned, and it's a, you know, it's a mostly irrelevant place for most of the people in the world. So it was very weird for me to see and very powerful. So I thought, okay, everyone wants to do something, and I as a Nepali, like, I probably have more context than a lot of the people on the ground, like who were trying to help or who wanted to help. So I was just like, okay, I don't know anything either, but I'm just gonna try and figure it out, and I'll be here and provide some context or raise awareness or do whatever, right? So we ended up I don't know how it started, but we just talked about, okay, maybe we will fundraise because everyone else was doing the same thing. There were several hurdles, obviously. One of the things was, okay, who is the leading person? There's, like, for any institution, I think a lot of the schools throughout the US that have a lot of Nepali students or some groups of Nepali students, they just came together. And there was someone always like looking, they were mostly independent groups. For us, it was Professor Craig and Bauer were here, and then there were a lot of other people who were also connected to Nepal somehow. So there was already like this sense of, okay, at least someone's there to ground me. And that was personal satisfaction. Okay, I'm not just doing random things, but there's someone looking over and giving me advice. And that was really important for me personally. Then we ended up somehow ended up, I don't really remember how this all happened, but we just ended up having the South Asian organization willing to help, and there were 7, 8 Nepali students here, PhD and Masters in Engineering Management, or like exchange students, and a couple of us. And we just, sort of just did things, tried to raise awareness to going to dining halls and talking about, oh, there's an earthquake that happened, and there were some surreal experiences that I would like to share. It's sort of like, I think when you're studying in a place like this, secluded, and it's supposed to be this intellectually like enlightening place, and we're all learning about the world issues, and, you know, like President Hanel was saying yesterday, we're all with like global civic engagement and all that stuff. But like a lot of these things happen in the world, Syria, Iraq, like things happening in Palestine, they just kind of go away. Nobody even talks about what is happening in Burma, and like, you know, small places that we don't know about, like UK is in a war with Lebanon, and we don't know these things, right? And those are sort of the things that always like strike me in education, where I'm supposed to be learning these great things, and that was one of the motivations for me to come here personally outside my country. Like, okay, I'm going to learn about these great things, and I'm like engaged with all these scholars. But it was kind of apparent from the case of the earthquake, because we're trying to raise awareness and kind of share this information, and it's like, it was all over the news, but there was still like a lot of Dartmouth kids who are, have this privileged background, they have access to information, they're always on their phone for some reason, but it's still unaware of so many things in the world, and that was kind of surprising to see. And I think a lot of the volunteers who were sitting on the tables also got really frustrated, because they saw, okay, there's like, obviously you have to do something, but there's no connection, but, okay, I'm just talking a lot. But anyway, so we just came together, and one of the things was people would just walk by. We would say, oh, would you like to donate? There's something going on, and they would just walk by. I'm like, no, thank you. There's just a very weird kind of reactions, and didn't really know what to make of it. But overall, the institutional support was really good. We just sort of like just raised funds. We talked about Asha yesterday, and we just directed the funds there. So we didn't really have a responsibility team going to Nepal. That's one of the things that we were really concerned about. Like, what do we do? We're just going to waste resources. Like, I would like to go to Nepal, but like not spend $2,000, and that's money should go to relief efforts itself. So that was one thing. I'm just going to close. I'll take one extra minute. One of the things that I think we have sort of touched on is the mental health aspect. And Kripa and I, when we were in Nepal this summer, we did a trauma resiliency. We were basically translating, working for this group called Trauma Resource Institute. Right? They were doing a trauma resiliency model training, community resiliency training camp for community members from all over Nepal, a lot of teachers, people who are working in different kinds of organizations, including organizations for trafficked women and women who themselves were trafficked, but they were also like kind of community leaders in their own communities. And they were from all over Nepal, and like a lot of earthquake-hit districts. I don't know how they managed to get all of those people together, but it was interesting to see how it's very simple body-based technique. I'm always critical. Kripa and I were very critical of this kind of things, but like, okay, we're getting paid, and the other translators were not doing good work, so we're like, okay, we should at least try and do something. And it was pretty powerful, because it's the simplest of things, like, okay, you just hold on to chair, and these are things that are kind of obvious when they're stated, but nobody has the vocabulary or like kind of awareness of these kind of things. But even though we were critical of like the methods and what maybe the organization, like we didn't have any background info on like what they were trying to do, where they are from, and how successful they were, because there were some sketchy, like weird things about them staying in a really nice facility within Kathmandu, and they're trying to help Nepal, but they don't want to even explore Nepal, and let's not go outside the center. There was this odd things, but regardless, there was still this, from the community members themselves, I think, who were teachers and leaders in their own communities, they found these very simple techniques, very logical, like you can distill all of the information down to like a few basic points, and they were really helpful. Like a lot of people felt empowered, and they were like, okay, we're gonna take these skills to their respective communities. Maybe we can talk about that if someone has questions. But I just wanted to mention, sorry for just rambling, but yeah, it's just a lot of thoughts. Thanks.
Why don't folks come up to the table? Yeah, Laurel, please.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions.
First of all, I just want to again thank the Dickey Center for this extraordinary event. Thank Ken and Sienna and kind of the collective will that brings us all together today. and most of all the students, because I've just heard some extraordinary things, and I'm just very grateful to be here, so thank you. I think what I'd like to do is kind of pose two questions to this group here and to you in the audience. And the first theme that I have taken away from the presentations this morning is one about the emotional response by students when disaster strikes far away from campus. And my observation about that is that campuses spend a lot of time, and administrations spend a lot of time, believe me, I know this, I'm part of an administration, making sure that campuses are safe places for students. And when disaster strikes far away that directly affects students, that sense of safety is violated in a very real way, very tangible way. And the first question then is, how can we respond effectively and compassionately, consistent with our university's missions when these things happen? Because these things are always going to be happening. And the second theme that I'd like to touch on is, what's the highest and best use of our universities in the face of disasters like this? How do university administrations best support initiatives that may come out of the reactions of students, the work of faculty, when those initiatives are not already part of the institutional structure? You know, there aren't ways to support them within the university. How do we mobilize ourselves to do that? And how do we make sure that other things don't get neglected in the process? So I guess it's a question of balancing act. So those are the two things that I'd kind of like to just throw out there for other people to talk about.
Let me, I used to be a student, but I'm a bit older now, but let me comment on the first question. And in my opinion, it's really the concept of resilience. Resilience does not have to happen on site. It can happen remotely. And when a student or group of students are affected by a remote disaster, whether it's natural, personal, of any type, it's the resilience and the social capital, especially the bonding within the community and the bridging between students and administrators, amongst others in the local community, amongst other universities. I think that's really the source of strength, the source of information, and the source to go forward. And I mean, if you look at every student's experience, that's how they do it, whether formally or informally. So just wanted to share that from a broad perspective.
I'm going to say something here. I was hinting at this, and I was just saying things earlier, but trying to connect that to sort of how I was talking about a lot of these issues in the world. It was just fly by, and we are engaged in a lot of homework and a lot of activities on campus, and and we have a lot of pressure here. And then suddenly there's this things in the world that you're supposed to be thinking about, and the college says, go engage with the world, and this or just has those words in the mission. But it seems like there's kind of a disconnect. Personally, as a student, even someone, and even in the case of the earthquake, someone who's directly connected, still felt like, okay, what do I do? Do I do my midterm tomorrow? Or I emailed the professor saying, okay, I might not do the homework for Wednesday. I'll try to. And then professor was like, no, you should really try to. So what do you do with that? So that's and the professors don't know, professors are unaware of these issues too. So a lot of, I think, there's just this ignorance of the world in a way. And I don't say it in a very bad way, but it seems like there's some things that we can do. And institutionally, I think if you have programs and right from the very beginning, maybe structurally, we change how, in our college, for example, distributed requirements work, where you're not just taking a class just for the sake of taking the class, where you're just very specific requirements, where now, for personally, next year I'll have to do next term I'll have to do certain things that, I've already kind of touched upon in many of my courses, but they don't truly reflect the distributed requirement, but somehow maybe structurally institutions could work on bringing these aspects of like how do you at least make people aware and really engage with these issues in class or outside of class in different kinds of ways. Just this, I mean, personally I felt the apathy, like you just forget, and you just think about physics and math and just forget the world. And things happen like this, and if it hits you personally, then suddenly you're doing something like this, right? And personally, I was invested, so I stayed and tried to do fundraising, but if it had happened somewhere else, maybe I would not have been that involved. So these are like, I think, real questions that nobody really asks sometimes, but I think institutionally, but these are big things, I don't know what else to say. Yeah.
If I could actually ask a question related to that and to Kath, about, could you tell us a little bit more about how institutionally you, so for Kath, how institutionally you and David and others involved in Cornell Nepal created the course that you did, and what the immediate goals of that course were. I think some of us, figured out ways to incorporate aspects of the Nepal events into the relevant classes that we were teaching, but that also took a certain amount of time and took some students into an area that they didn't expect to be going in, let's say, a global health curriculum. And so, yeah, just could you talk a little bit about how you made those decisions, how Cornell responded to those decisions, and what you've learned from that?
First of all, I want to say, मलाई त यति साह्रै खुसी लाग्यो यहाँ त प्यानलसम्म म त एकजना मात्रै क्वेरी भएको खुसी लाग्यो So the several things I think are really interesting, and I think your question is very related to Laurel's question, and I like really what both Ashish and Pawan had to say, so I'm going to try to return to that. I think one thing, we were very fortunate. You'll see the documents that I circulate around are far less polished than a usual course syllabus would have to be, and we're adding resources, we're trying to do things, but I was lucky because we had an omnibus course number in the curriculum. Most of the time that was deployed for independent studies, all right? So but instead of calling it independent study about the Himalayas, we called it Special Problems in Himalayan Studies. Well, an earthquake is definitely a special problem. Then the other challenge was to link it to the existing courses in the curriculum. And that took different pieces for different students, depending on what their interests were. The core course, I think, is Professor Bowers is undoubtedly more interesting than mine, but it's like the course that you're doing on the Himalayas and Tibetan Himalayas. It's a 4-credit undergraduate, graduate course, all right? And then we built in some extra sessions that were intended to, so someone could take the core course and there'd be a little bit more talking about earthquake-related stuff in it, because you cannot, there's always been earthquake-related stuff in it. Now it's just a little more pressing. So some children, that was terrible. Some of the students could take that course. I'm getting old. That was said lovingly. Some of the students would take that course because they were planning to go to Nepal or were from Nepal, and they could take it in more or less the way it always was. Some students could be involved in the Earthquake Recovery Partnership and only be expected to participate in the add-on half an hour or whatever that's specifically focused on the earthquake, and watch the PowerPoints that provided the sort of core information. So it was creating different pathways, but a critical tool was having that omnibus number. I mean, for being able to move quickly. But I think the issue, and institutionally, that is a real challenge for us to be robust enough. It takes a long time to develop a really strong course. And so for someone to say suddenly, you know, can you do a course on? The answer is kind of no, right? But I think you can do these sort of bridging things where, and you'll notice the one course is a 2-credit course. That's a half course, and the other is its more robust one. So that's a part of a way. That meant that the students who are in the 2-credit course, they're from engineering, they're from health program, they're from all different kinds of fields, which allowed them to get some academic credit to focus specifically on earthquake-related events, but still be an engineering student or still be something else. All right. So recognizing that students have deeply competing requirements in their lives. They have their homework to do, right? And that's where I think that the question of how a university can respond, I would say compassionately and consistently, in some respects, this is a reminder of us. Again, most universities and colleges have some way for dealing with student health needs, with family emergencies. There's generally some structure in place for sending word out to all of the teachers that student's working with in that semester. And I think we could, as administrators, remind ourselves that this shouldn't just include a parental death, but it should include an earthquake or a flood or a tsunami or that students would appreciate. You know, I think the feeling of isolation, the sort of desperation that many people have recounted to me of, why can't I get through? I mean, even some of you talking about how many hours it took you to contact your families. And it has struck me over the years that we are increasingly, both in the US and in Nepal, accustomed to the idea that you can get onto Viber and you can get onto somewhere and that connection is seamless and instantaneous. Of course, those of us who have worked and lived in Nepal for a long time know that it was not so long ago that when you wanted to make an international phone call, you had to reserve a spot at the central telephone office down near Tapatali, and you know. So I have to remind myself that all of you have come up in a universe where being connected is one of the conditions of well-being, because I don't mind if my phone goes dead for 3 weeks. Doesn't bother me in the same way. So I think remembering that the kind of support that particularly international students, but I want to come back to Ashish G's comment about resilience. I think we have to think very carefully and very thoughtfully about what resilience means, because resilience, in the sense that I'm sure you were using it, is something. It's like emotional weightlifting. It's like being able to feel sure, and sort of what Kripa was talking about. You know, what do you do with fear? How can you not run when you're feeling isolated, frightened, and maybe in real danger, right? So resilience is part of that confidence that external events are not going to take you down. Or if they are, they're going to take you down gracefully, right? But it can be, the concept can be deployed, and I think it has sometimes in the conversations in Nepal been used to mask traumatized inaction, right? Patience when really anger is more appropriate. And I'm very conscious of the ways in which the earthquake actually played into a lot of Western understandings of Nepal as this place that time forgot, this place where everything is sort of mad, this place that sort of doesn't even really exist in the modern world anymore. And then now it really doesn't exist. It really, you know, and the way that Nepalese peoples are often represented as being, it's like a mega Gurkha, you know, they're brave, they're courageous, they're hardy, and when resilience is in that string of utterances, I want to kick it out the window. I mean, I want everyone to stand up and say, you know, I'll be resilient for myself, but I'm going to fight for making situations better for others. So.
Yeah, I had a comment and a question. First of all, thank you all for your remarks. It takes a great deal of courage to be a student and to step aside from however your life is defined and to do things like you've done, so thank you. And on that topic, the comment is, you know, how do you make space? How do you create space and a structure of a curriculum? I can't speak to being a professor or an administrator. I can speak to being a student at Dartmouth, Yale, and Cornell. And there's some interesting, you have to create credit, you have to create a mind share for students, especially at schools like this, where everyone is oversubscribed. There's absolutely zero time in the day of a student in this day and age at an institution like this. The way that Yale, by way of an example, the way that the Yale School of Forest and Environmental Studies has done two things I think that are interesting here. One, a clinic format for a class. They don't have a disaster clinic, but they do have social justice clinics. They have an environmental protection clinic where you have essentially 15 or 16, let's say, client projects from organizations that are embedded in the world, that are embedded in different, let's say, disasters around in different settings. And they could be long-term projects, they could be immediate projects. But when something happens, you could easily add to that, and students could easily shift into that and take on a new clinic project that could be accelerated. I think that would be an important way if you establish relationships, for example, in Haiti or in Dartmouth, or rather in Nepal, and in the disasters to come. This will be a way to accommodate that. Sort of an open revolving door that facilitates these kind of commitments. And that could be for 1 credit, could be for 2 credits, could be for 3 credits. That's how Yale does it, depending upon the hours of that particular clinic commitment, which is interesting. Yale also has this long-term class that's been taught on Haiti because of particular relationships that were there, that started in the immediate wake, and it continues. So I think there's something to be said for both going horizontally across disasters and vertically into a specific context. Sienna and others, Kath, you know, starting these things now, they'll still be relevant in 4 or 5 years. We already know that. So it's great that you're already up and running. To the question, which I think, which I'm really interested to, we've talked a little bit, and Kath has talked, is involved deeply in this kind of work, but your relationship to Nepal has changed, right, in ways that you didn't expect while you've been here. Your relationship to Kathmandu, particularly, is contested and difficult at times, right? So how do student networks here, maybe just some ideas from all of you, how do student networks here and groups like Dartmouth-for-Nepal, Cornell Recovery Partnership, how do they engage with students in Kathmandu? How do you establish parallel partnerships? What are you most excited about when you look at Kathmandu from afar? Things like, you know, there are massive resources at places like Pulchok Engineering College, where students have already done a great deal of work. Connect Dartmouth engineers with them, those kind of things. What do you think? Thanks.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I'd like to talk about, I'd like to add on the idea of resiliency that the Nepali have developed after surviving several hammer blows. Yes, Nepali have developed that idea of resiliency and have survived so many natural calamities. And then I feel like the people, the Nepali who are here in US are more worried about like earthquake or about the effects of earthquake than the people who are surviving, who are living with it. And then my father, he was in house even after earthquake. There were several aftershocks, and then he just I contacted him, and then he was saying, "Don't worry, I'm living in the house, and it's just the aftershock. It's just the alarm clock that has been going on for like so many hours." So it's like I think after coming here, we have lost that sense of like resiliency, but the people over there have like. I mean, yeah, going back to your idea of how to define resiliency, it's just very, I think they are used to it, and then they are conditioned to surviving, like adapting to that situation, I think. And talking about the partnership, Colby Sir College has, like, as I already mentioned in the discussion, like we have been doing a lot of trips to Nepal, and then it has been a great platform to bring all the American students to Nepal and then expose them to the cultural opportunities over there. And it would be a great if students that are in Nepal, that are in US, collaborate and then do some project in partnership with the students that are in Nepal. And I think one of the ways, like Pulchok Engineering College or Tribhuvan University or the students from several university, if we can form a network like that and then have that long distance connection in US and Nepal, that would be so great in updating ourselves with what's happening in Nepal, at the same time how we are doing the efforts at our level in US, and then that kind of removes the gap in information, and at the same time connects us more, and then develop that sense of resiliency maybe that we have lost. So I think one of the ways that we can do partnership is basically like we can take more students, like the American students or whoever want to go to Nepal and then have that cultural experience, or like do some humanitarian effort, that making that opportunity available at the time when they want to go there and then do something. And I think if we can form that partnership, then we can easily create like that atmosphere where students in US can go and then do some work, field work, and yeah, it's just connecting the gaps. I think the partnership really helps in connecting the gap and bringing students from and to Nepal, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the things I actually loved about a lot of the presentations yesterday, and then Professor March today was also mentioning how public partnerships are so important. And her model started with community requests, and I think Dartmouth does a great job in terms of like giving us a lot of off terms and a lot of off-term funding. So students are going out into the world and doing internships all over the world, but there's not enough resources from sort of like information in a way. Like there's so many people who've gone to Nepal, and I'm always wondering like, why did you never talk to us in a way? Like, there was people, I won't mention the group, but there was this group that ended up in Kathmandu and stayed at my house for a bit, and then like 4 weeks into their project asked my father for help regarding site selection. I'm like, this should be happening before you get there, not once you get there. And there are all these resources. Okay, granted, maybe a lot of Nepali grads don't stay in Nepal and maybe continue, whether it's for higher education or jobs, continue to stay in US and abroad. But there's a lot of like pockets of US returnees or whoever. There's networks you can tap into, and I think that's sort of the thing that I would really love to build. Like Pawan and I will be in Nepal next year, so if anyone's coming, you should talk to us first. Just help. And another thing kind of is the way that like the foreigner coming in and helping Nepal, kind of the same dynamic is sometimes with Kathmandu people going in and helping in villages, because I'm a Kathmandu native. I have no family outside of Kathmandu, and so I have very little context in a way. But one of the things that really helped me over the last 3 years was just going and volunteering with people that I already knew there who were doing great work. And those understanding context and understanding those partnerships was what was great. And it's not, I feel like a lot of the focus sometimes is on our education, and like I've taken advantage of that. Like you want to learn, you want to build your resume, you want to do more volunteer service, but you've also got to ask like what is needed, like what are the problems you want to solve in the world, like what does the world actually need, and kind of fit into that. And I think the program there's a lot of resources and funding that Dartmouth throws at you, and I'm sure a lot of other colleges do too. But in addition to just focusing on like student needs, I think focusing on partnerships and like how can we build a student to be a better human being and be more concerned, conscientious students and human beings would be great as well. I'm sorry.
I'll just add one more thing.
Really quick.
Really quick, okay.
Yeah, very, very quick.
Yeah, I just wanted to address one aspect like you were asking about, or like the exciting things when you think about, okay, now like you can go back, or when you have kind of come from a place and you have a perspective that's different to like what my friends have. One of the things that I think we were talking about yesterday too, of how youth has been re-energized, and it's just like everyone, even my friends who are in Kathmandu and they were doing a lot of work after the earthquake, I think just suddenly realized that, okay, oh, actually we can do things, because there was this sort of mentality among us, like a lot of young people that, okay, you know, this is like, oh, everyone is like, what do you do? And suddenly like something happened and everyone just did things without even thinking about it. And like then just suddenly this realization that I found when we went home this summer was just like everyone was talking about, okay, I'm gonna try and do this, I'm gonna try and do this. So there was this sense of kind of empowerment, and there's just like sudden, oh, like what is this? People just woke up and were like, okay, things can be done, and the things are challenging. I think one of the things that's motivating me more and more to go back directly after graduation is also that, like, just saw that, okay, there's an opportunities, you always knew that, but you never really thought of how to kind of go about those things. But I think the earthquake kind of presented this opportunity of, you know, not just enabled the youth to kind of think about things in Nepal, but also, yeah, enabled us to kind of say, okay, like there are there's concrete progress to be made in many respects. So that's like one of the more exciting things for me personally.
Can I just share one piece of information? What you're all pointing to is the need for this longer-term partnership, that things happen, and I think that is really essential. That is what is absolutely unique about the Cornell partnership. We would be happy to work with student groups from other places. There's no question about it. Both in the program that's in Nepal, it's in the process of rebuilding its buildings. But I also want to mention this group. Many of you know it, Abari. But what you may not know is that Abari has developed a really fine 3-week study abroad volunteer program that I'm concerned about balancing this experiential learning with that other kind, the homework kind, right? And they've done a really brilliant job creating a structure around it that I think is robust academically. So that would be one place to talk with your study abroad folks about, so that they know that those opportunities exist for people to go and do something in Nepal. And I think they've done a really fine job.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's give our hand to our panelists. Okay, Nepali Satyaru, ya basnus, and we will reconvene at 2 o'clock for the town hall with Svarnim and Mahendraji. So look forward to seeing you. Those going to Carson with Sienna can follow Sienna. And if you have any questions, please come and ask me. So the anthropology students will be coming in now.